Welcome to Module 2 of the GRR Technical Training Series. Module Aim and Reminders. This module discusses the optimization requirements set out in the GRR. These are Requirement R1, Optimization of Waste Management Options, and Requirement R13, Optimization of On-Site Disposals. This is the second GRR Technical Training module out of 8 in total. Before we discuss these requirements in more detail, it is worth just reminding ourselves about a few basic points. The GRR stands for the Management of Radioactive Waste from Decommissioning of Nuclear Sites, Guidance on Requirements for Release from Radioactive Substances Regulation, which was published in July 2018. The guidance is available on the SEPA website and can also be accessed via a summary on gov.uk. We use the term Radioactive Substances Regulation to cover the relevant legislation, which is different in Scotland from that in England and Wales. Although the legislation differs in detail, it shares common aims. We have written the GRR to fulfil those aims. Finally, please remember that the GRR applies to all stages of a nuclear site's life cycle and that all the requirements of the GRR need to be addressed for the final surrender of a site's permit. International Framework for Radiological Protection. The principle of optimization is set out in International Guidance for Radiological Protection. It is an integral part of the International Radiation Protection Framework established in recommendations by the International Commission on Radiological Protection, the ICRP, and adopted in standards and guidance published by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. The ICRP system of radiation protection is based on 3 fundamental principles: justification, optimization, and dose limitation. The principle of optimization requires that the likelihood of incurring exposures, the number of people exposed, and the magnitude of their individual exposure should all be kept as low as reasonably achievable, or ALARA, taking into account economic and social factors. In addition, as part of the optimization process, the ICRP recommends that there should be restrictions on the doses to individuals from a particular source, and this leads to the concept of dose constraints. Dose constraints are set at a level that is lower, that is, more protective, than the legal dose limit. The 3 principles are made legally binding through the European Basic Safety Standards Directive. This directive has been transposed into law across Great Britain. International Basis for Optimization. The IAEA Safety Fundamentals establish a fundamental safety objective and 10 associated principles of protection and safety. The principles reflect an international consensus on what constitutes a high level of safety for protecting people and the environment from the harmful effects of ionizing radiation. The IAEA's Principle 5 states that safety measures must be optimized such that they provide protection to the highest level of safety that can be reasonably achieved. The optimization of protection of people from radiation risks requires judgments to be made about the relative significance of various other aspects and interests, including the environment, economics, and society. Optimization in the GRR. Before we discuss optimization in detail, it is important to understand the relationship between optimization and the numerical standards set out in the GRR. The dose constraint, that is, requirement R9 in the GRR, restricts exposures that can occur during the operational and decommissioning period. This acts as an upper bound on the options that can be considered as part of the optimization process for radioactive waste management. We also apply standards of protection after release from radioactive substances regulation through requirements R10 to R12 in the GRR. The numerical standards define the envelope of environmental safety, within which the optimization process aims to identify the preferred option for the management of radioactive waste. Please note that these requirements are covered in further detail in Module 5, Understanding the Numerical Standards. Following international guidance, optimization is at the core of the GRR. This is reflected in Principle 2 of the guidance, optimization as low as reasonably achievable. Principle 2 states that a site shall be brought to a condition at which it can be released from radioactive substances regulation through a process that will keep the radiological risks to individual members of the public and the population as whole as low as reasonably achievable throughout the period of regulation and afterwards, as far as can be judged at the time when the relevant actions are taken. Optimization is a continuing, forward-looking and iterative process aimed at maximising the margin of benefits over harm. It takes into account technical, economic and social factors and requires qualitative as well as quantitative judgments. It involves continually questioning whether everything reasonable has been done to reduce risks. Process of optimization. Optimization decisions balance the detriment or harm associated with the radiological risk, together with other benefits and detriments arising from the option under consideration, with the resources available for protecting people and the environment. These decisions are taken at the time, so need to account for the current conditions as well as projections into the future. The result of optimization provides a preferred option with a radiological risk at a suitably low level, but not necessarily the option with the lowest possible radiological risk. The terms best available techniques in England and Wales and best practicable means in Scotland refer to the option that is identified from the optimization process. The GRR optimization requirements. The GRR provides specific requirements which, if they are fulfilled proportionately, should ensure that the GRR principles, including optimization, are properly applied. Requirements R1 and R13 of the GRR specifically address the optimization principle. These two requirements can be summed up by the following questions. For R1, what is the best option for each radioactive waste stream and area of contamination? And for R13, if on-site disposal is selected under R1, how best should the waste be disposed on-site, or in the case of contamination, be managed on the site? For clarity, R13 is only relevant if the waste management option selected under R1 is for on-site management. The next few slides discuss requirements R1 and R13 in more detail. R1. Optimization of waste management options. R1. Optimization of waste management options is one of 6 management requirements, each of which concern the planning, execution and recording of radioactive waste management throughout the lifetime of a nuclear site. R1 requires that operators employ a systematic process to select optimised waste management options for each waste stream. The chosen options must enable the site to be released from radioactive substances regulation in accordance with the requirements in the GRR. To identify an optimised solution, operators should carry out options assessments where there are choices to be made between sufficiently different alternatives, including different variations of on-site disposal where appropriate. Operators should present the results to us and other relevant stakeholders and make them publicly available. The assessments will inform the operator's decisions. We will not agree to an approach that focuses principally on meeting the numerical dose and risk criteria and does not address optimization of the waste management options. Optimization in nuclear decommissioning and cleanup should ensure that radioactive waste and contamination are managed in a way that is safe, but may not necessarily lead to all radioactive substances being removed from a site. Factors to consider in option selection. Optimization under R1 must balance many factors, which should be addressed in the options assessment to arrive at the best overall option, i.e., the option where the risk of public exposure to ionizing radiation is as low as reasonably achievable. The slide gives some examples of factors that might be considered in an assessment. It should be noted that this is not an exhaustive list, and many factors will be site-specific. I'll just expand on 2 of these. Non-radiological hazards, that is, the non-radiological properties associated with the radioactive waste, and environment, the wider environmental impacts, such as use of resources, CO2 production, etc. The Waste Management Plan, as set out in Requirement 2 of the GRR, is the vehicle for operators to set out their arguments for optimisation of waste management options. Please note that this requirement is covered in further detail in Module 3, Waste Management Plan. R13. Optimisation of on-site disposals. If the optimization of waste management options undertaken to fulfill requirement R1 determines that on-site disposal is the best overall option for a particular waste stream, the operator then has to address optimization of that on-site disposal under requirement R13. The operator should consider how to optimize the specific on-site disposal, including assessing the design, construction where applicable, and implementation of the disposal. This is to ensure radiological risks to individual members of the public and the population as a whole are as low as reasonably achievable, both throughout the period of radioactive substances regulation and afterwards. Under requirement R13, the operator should consider what more can be done to achieve reductions in radiological risk, taking account of the economic and social factors that are applicable. This might, for example, include evaluating the benefits and detriments of decontaminating structures or removing hotspots, capping or covering to minimise entry of water, and reducing the likelihood or impact of inadvertent human intrusion, enhancing or implementing engineered barriers, emplacing waste in locations that optimise retention of radionuclides and minimise risk from human intrusion, treating or isolating waste, or disabling preferential pathways such as drains. Successful optimization ensures a suitably low level of risk from radiation exposure that will meet the numerical standards of the GRR, but does not necessarily require the lowest possible risk. Optimization in the wider context. Any on-site radioactive waste disposal or management of radioactive contamination must comply with the GRR numerical standards. The GRR numerical standards address the period of radioactive substances regulation and afterwards. The standards that apply in these two periods are different to reflect the different approaches to radiological protection for normal exposures, those expected to occur, and potential exposures, those that are not certain to occur. Requirement R9 applies during the period of radioactive substances regulation and places dose constraints on any waste management options. Requirements R10, R11, and R12 apply after release from radioactive substances regulation and address different scenarios for exposure to radioactivity. These reflect potential exposures from radioactive waste and contamination being managed on the site. Requirement R10 defines a risk guidance level to protect people from any radioactivity migrating through the environment. Requirement R11 defines a dose guidance level to protect people during and after potential inadvertent human intrusion. And Requirement R12 requires operators to consider natural disruptive processes. Please note that these requirements are covered in further detail in Module 5, Understanding the Numerical Standards. Demonstrating the optimization process. The GRR requires site operators to produce a waste management plan and a site-wide environmental safety case, or SWESC. These two products are covered in more detail in Module 3 and Module 4, respectively. One of the principal aims of the waste management plan is to demonstrate that radioactive waste management has been optimized. In this way, the waste management plan is partly a means to show that requirement R1 and R13 have been addressed. The SWESC verifies that implementing the waste management plan provides an overall outcome that is safe for people and the environment, i.e., that it meets the numerical standards in the GRR. If the standards for the site as a whole cannot be met, the waste management plan will need to be revisited. Further guidance on optimization. Some additional guidance on optimization is available from the environment agencies. RSR Principles of Optimization in the Management and Disposal of Radioactive Waste is guidance published by the EA which sets out the principles and framework for undertaking studies on optimization and the identification of best available technique. Satisfying the ALARA requirement and the role of best practicable means is a document published by SEPA that sets out how SEPA complies with the requirement placed on it to ensure that exposures to ionizing radiation of the public are kept as low as reasonably achievable, and the role that best practicable means, or BPM, fulfills in satisfying that requirement. This document also provides SEPA's interpretation of the term BPM and the expectations of operators who have to use BPM as required by conditions in their permits. Next steps. This module has covered the 2 optimisation requirements of the GRR. These were Requirement R1, Optimisation of Waste Management Options, and Requirement R13, Optimisation of On-Site Disposals. While all training modules are designed to be viewed independently, we suggest that Module 3, Waste Management Plan, is viewed next. Thank you.